About 3 million years ago, when the first human-like creatures started living on Earth, there was one of them who would become our main character. In the beginning, he looked just like the others from his species called Australopithecus. He didn't stand out and lived just like the rest of them, but inside there was something very different about him. Something even he didn't realize at the time. He really loved hunting more than anything else, but he thought he was just a normal member of his group. Then something strange started to happen. He saw that the other people around him were growing older, getting weaker, and then dying. But he wasn't changing like them. No matter how many years passed or what happened to him, he didn't die. Time kept moving. Hundreds, then thousands, and even millions of years passed. While everything else changed and people came and went, he stayed the same. Even though he didn't age like others, his body did change. He became stronger, larger, and more powerful over time. The world kept changing, but he was always there, living on. The only things that made his endless life feel meaningful were hunting animals, fighting strong enemies, and looking for people or creatures who could challenge him. But even with all that, his life felt very lonely. Living forever started to feel more like a punishment than something special. He lived like this for almost 3 million years, slowly changing and improving every single day. In the end, he became so powerful that no one could beat him. People started calling him the god of Earth. His name was Mu. Mu became so strong that he was able to defeat every other god in existence. Because of this, he was given the title of the most powerful being in the divine realm, a place where gods and other powerful beings live. But after beating all of his enemies, things started to change for him. The exciting fights and intense battles that used to give his life meaning were gone. There was no one left who could challenge him, and without that thrill, life started to feel boring and empty. Feeling tired of the same boring routine every day, Mu became frustrated. One day, he was so annoying that he slammed his foot into the ground. He didn't even use his full strength, but the impact was so strong that the entire divine realm shook. This realm, which looked like a small planet floating in space, trembled like it was about to fall apart. But that powerful stomp wasn't even the worst part. The shockwaves from it spread across the divine realm, shaking even the skies. Gods, angels, and dark creatures all felt the powerful vibrations and froze in fear. But this wasn't something new. Mu had done things like this before. Some of the gods were tired of having to deal with the earthquakes and destruction he caused every time he got bored or angry. One of those gods was Lucifer, the second strongest being in the realm after Mu. Mu didn't seem to care about the damage or fear he caused. He wasn't trying to scare anyone. He just felt stuck, like his strength had made life meaningless. For hundreds of years, the same thought kept bothering him. He had already beaten every powerful enemy easily. And for more than 1,000 years, not even one worthy opponent had shown up. Feeling tired and hopeless, he sighed and quietly said to himself, "Being too strong is its own kind of curse." Right after Mu spoke those words, something suddenly changed in his mind. It was like something finally clicked. For over 1,000 years, he had been feeling angry and bored, not knowing what to do. But now a new idea suddenly popped into his head, like a light bulb turning on. He thought, if being too powerful is what's making my life boring, maybe the solution is to stop being so strong. That idea started to make sense to him. If he became weaker, like a regular human living on Earth, then there would be many people who would challenge him. He could enjoy fighting again and feel excitement like before. Excited by this idea, Mu quickly jumped up from his throne and shouted, "Dragonling." The moment he said that, something amazing happened. The sky split open and a huge dragon flew down from the clouds. When it landed, the ground shook like there was a massive earthquake. The dragon was gigantic, about 5 times taller than Mu's throne. At first, it looked kind of annoyed or grumpy, but that was just its usual face. This wasn't an ordinary dragon. It was Liam, the powerful and loyal dragon who served as Mu's right hand. He was trusted more than anyone else. Liam looked at Mu with his glowing eyes, and then he growled in a deep voice, asking why Mu had called him. But Mu didn't really explain much. Instead of giving a full answer, he simply turned around and started walking away. He casually told Liam to take care of things while he was gone, as if it was no big deal. But Liam didn't just accept that. Without saying much, he suddenly used a powerful spell called the Binding of the Absolute. This spell was meant to trap Mu and stop him from leaving. For a second, it looked like Liam was being brave and standing up to Mu. But then Mu slowly turned his head and gave Liam a sharp side glance. His eyes were filled with silent anger. That one look was enough to completely destroy Liam's confidence. In an instant, all the bravery and boldness Liam had shown disappeared. He became scared and ashamed, frozen by fear. The dragon started to panic. He began to speak nervously, stumbling over his words as he tried to explain himself. He said he didn't mean to be disrespectful or challenge Mu's authority. He just thought Mu should have warned him ahead of time, especially because there was an important meeting of the gods coming up soon. But Mu didn't care at all about the meeting. He didn't even turn around or answer. He just kept walking forward, dragging both the giant dragon and the magical chains behind him. It was like they weighed nothing at all to him. When Liam saw that trying to stop Mew by force didn't work, he changed his approach. Instead of being bold, he started acting sad and desperate. He made a pitiful face and began to complain, saying that if Mew didn't go to the gods' meeting, he would be the one stuck listening to all their angry complaints about Mew's behavior. Still, Mew wasn't bothered at all. Without even breaking a sweat, he completely destroyed the magical chains that were supposed to hold him back. It was like smashing a piece of glass. Then he turned around and yelled at the dragon, saying he wouldn't go anywhere unless Liam agreed to fight him right there and then. That one threat was all it took. Liam suddenly realized that dealing with angry gods at a meeting was way better than fighting Mew in a real battle. His attitude changed immediately. The tough act was gone, and he nervously wished Mew a safe and quick journey instead. Mew smiled with a confident smirk. Then he turned toward a small, Earth-like sphere that was floating in the air nearby. It looked like a miniature version of the planet Earth. He reached out and gently touched its surface. As his fingers brushed against it, one big question filled his mind. Whose body should I take over once I arrive on Earth? To figure out whose body he should take over on Earth, Mew began to secretly listen to the prayers and messages that humans were sending to the gods. He was basically eavesdropping on their thoughts and wishes. Most of the messages were boring and unimportant, people asking for small favors or complaining about everyday problems. None of them caught his attention. But then one message stood out from the rest. It wasn't a prayer asking for help, and it wasn't someone begging for something. It was something different, a bold question that actually challenged the idea of Mew even existing. It was direct, fearless, and unlike anything he'd heard in a long time. At first, this message annoyed him. He wasn't used to being questioned like that. But as he thought more about it, something inside him changed. Instead of being angry, he started to feel interested. This person was exactly what he had been looking for. They were the perfect choice for him to connect with on Earth. For the first time in 1,000 years, Mew felt a real thrill, like a fire had been lit inside him. He had finally found a way to break out of his never-ending boredom. While Mew was getting more and more excited, his assistant, the dragon Liam, was the exact opposite. Liam looked nervous and clearly wasn't happy about what was going on. For a second, Mew thought about explaining his plan, but then he changed his mind. He was always confident and didn't feel the need to explain himself. So he just said goodbye and told Liam to take care of things while he was away. He also told him to handle anyone who came asking questions. Liam stood there, confused and a little irritated. But then it hit him. Mew wasn't actually planning to leave the divine realm in person. He was only going to send his soul to Earth. His powerful body would stay behind. The dragon, still feeling uneasy, tried to warn Mew one last time. He told him that what he was doing could be dangerous. If something happened to Mew's body while his soul was away on Earth, it might be the end of him. There was a real risk that he could die for good, but Mew wasn't worried at all. He believed that no one in the divine realm would ever be brave or foolish enough to lay a finger on his body. He was so confident in his power and reputation that he was sure nothing could go wrong. Even though the dragon kept pleading with him to reconsider, Mew didn't care. Just like always, he ignored the advice and warnings of others. He had already made up his mind. Without explaining anything further, Mew moved ahead with his plan. Then suddenly, everything changed. The scene we were watching shifted completely. We were no longer looking at Mew or the divine realm. Instead, we saw a totally different person. Someone who had just finished fighting a fierce battle against a demon lord. He looked thrilled, smiling with joy as he celebrated his hard-won victory. But that battle wasn't real. It was just the final cutscene of a video game. The person who had won the fight wasn't a hero. It was just a player sitting in front of a screen. That player was a 17-year-old boy named Lee Ho. He was just an ordinary teenager, and in real life, he felt stuck and unhappy. He didn't like his life at all. Lee Ho was full of jealousy. He wished he could be like the powerful game characters he looked up to. He admired how they were always strong, brave, and surrounded by cute girls. They lived exciting lives full of danger, adventure, and glory. As the credits of the game rolled down the screen, Lee let out a long, deep sigh. He wished, just once, that his own life could be like the stories in his games. Lee Ho suddenly dropped his phone. It slipped from his hand, tumbling down through the air like it was falling from a great height. In just a few seconds, it crashed onto the ground with a loud noise breaking into pieces. It became clear why Lee Ho had been standing on the edge of a 3-story building. He had been ready to end his life. His body was shaking from exhaustion and pain, and he was covered in bruises and injuries. With a deep, bitter sigh, he whispered his final goodbye to a world that had been cruel to him. Then, without looking back or hesitating, he jumped off the edge. As he fell through the air, the wind roared past him, and Lee Ho screamed in panic. Tears blurred his vision as he descended. His voice echoed in the air, filled with hopelessness. "If there's a god out there," he shouted, "now's your chance to prove it. Send me to another world." He begged for a miracle. But before he could even finish his desperate plea, his body slammed into the ground with a sickening thud. Blood splattered and his head hit the pavement so hard that it seemed impossible he could still be alive. By all logic, Liho should have been dead. But then something strange happened. Liho's hands twitched. They started shaking uncontrollably. His chest rose and fell as he gasped for air, as though he had just been pulled out of deep water. What Liho didn't know was that, in that very moment, just before he hit the ground, Mu's soul had taken over his body. Now Mu found himself stuck in the painful reality of Liho's broken, battered body. His new form was filled with injuries, and Mu was completely unaware of what had just happened. He was in too much pain to understand how everything had changed. Meanwhile, Liho's soul had been transported to the divine realm. As soon as he arrived, he was stunned, his mouth hanging open in shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. The thing that surprised him the most wasn't just the strange, otherworldly place he had ended up in. What really shocked him was that he was standing right in front of a massive, angry dragon. The dragon's face made it clear he was absolutely furious to see Liho there. The feeling was mutual. The dragon was just as shocked as Liho. He hadn't expected to see a human in the divine realm, especially not this quickly. And Liho definitely hadn't expected his first sight after dying to be a giant, furious dragon glaring down at him. Now let's rewind a little bit to understand what happened just before everything went wrong. 10 seconds before all of this, Mu had been standing confidently with his usual smirk on his face, lightly touching the surface of the tiny earth floating in front of him. Mu wasn't worried at all about leaving his body behind. He had so much confidence, maybe even too much confidence. The dragon tried to warn him, telling him that it might not be a good idea, but Mu didn't listen. As usual, he completely ignored the warning and without any hesitation, sent his soul racing towards Earth. In doing so, he swapped places with Liho's soul. The very next moment, something completely unexpected happened. As soon as Mu's soul entered Liho's body, he realized that he was in a life or death situation. There was no time to adjust or even think. He hadn't been warned. He was falling through the air, plummeting toward the ground at an incredible speed. Less than a second. That was all the time he had to understand the danger he was in before it was too late. And then it happened. Liho's body crashed into the ground with a force that seemed impossible. The impact wasn't just painful, it was catastrophic. Bones shattered into pieces, and his body was flung backward like a ragdoll, tumbling through the air before finally coming to a stop. The pain Mu felt was unlike anything he had ever experienced in his immortal life. It was unbearable. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the confusion. Why had this happened? The moment his soul entered Liho's body, everything went wrong. Why had it all gone so horribly wrong so quickly? Nothing made sense to Mu. His hands trembled uncontrollably as shock and panic flooded through the borrowed body. But then everything went eerily silent. The shaking stopped. In that moment of stillness, the awful truth hit him like a cold wave. He was dying. There was no way to change his fate. No time to fix anything. And just like that, his borrowed body lay motionless on the cold, unforgiving ground. The area around Mu was eerily quiet, with no one nearby to witness the fall of what had once been a proud and powerful god. There was no one to help him, and no one even seemed to notice what had just happened. But despite all of this wasn't the end for Mu, not yet. You see, just like humans have involuntary muscles that work without them even thinking about it, like the heart beating and other internal organs working, Mu had spent 3 million years mastering control over his own body. He had reached a level of understanding of the human form that was so complete, it allowed him to control every part of his body, including the vessels and organs. Nothing was beyond his control. That's why, just moments after dying, Mu's heart started beating again. The pain was intense, even for someone like him, but by forcing his blood to flow and healing his heart, he was able to stop the bleeding. Slowly but surely, Mu began to stand up as if nothing had happened, even though every inch of his body was in excruciating pain. But instead of feeling angry or frustrated about the chaos of the situation, Mu felt something strange, happiness. Beaten, bloody, and in pain, he realized that it had been so long since he had felt anything like this. This rush of sensation was new, and it convinced him that coming to Earth had been the right decision after all. Mu's next move was to look into Liho's memories so he could learn about the life he had just taken over. It didn't take him long to understand everything: who Liho was, what kind of life he lived, and all the struggles he had faced. After seeing all that, Mu decided to head to Liho's house, which would now be his new base while he figured out what to do next. But even walking was a challenge. Liho's body was badly hurt and weak, so Mu couldn't move normally. To make it easier, he dropped to all fours. using his hands and feet like an ape to help support himself and move more quickly without putting too much pressure on his legs. Eventually, he reached Lee Ho's house. The first thing he noticed was a pile of cat poop right outside the window, not exactly a warm welcome. When he stepped into the small basement-like room, he sat down on the squeaky old bed and took a moment to think. From the memories he saw, he learned that Lee Ho only had one male relative, and that person lived far away. It became clear that Lee Ho had been completely alone, poor, and living a really sad and difficult life. One of the few things Lee Ho actually did was go to something called school. But out of everything in his memories, what stood out most to Mew was one person at that school, someone who had made it their mission to bully Lee Ho all the time. They picked fights, caused trouble, and did everything they could to make his life even worse. This kind of messy and unpredictable situation was exactly what Mew had been looking for. It was wild, full of surprises, and had tons of potential challenges, and Mew loved that kind of chaos. Feeling a sudden rush of excitement, he couldn't help himself. He threw a punch up into the air, like he was celebrating a victory. But right after doing that, a sharp, stabbing pain shot through his right arm. It felt like his muscles had been torn apart. Right away, Mew knew something wasn't right. He figured the pain was probably from how much he had used his arms while crawling home like an animal. Now it was clear, his body hadn't been used for anything physical in a really long time. From what Mew could tell by digging through the memories, Lee Ho mostly used his arms for things like scrolling on his phone or typing on a keyboard. So even small movements were now causing intense soreness and pain. But instead of being upset or angry about how weak this body was, Mew actually smiled. He was genuinely happy to feel this kind of pain again. It reminded him that he was alive, and it had been thousands of years since he had felt anything this real. Meanwhile, early the next morning, police arrived at the spot where Lee Ho had jumped and landed. There was broken glass, blood, and signs that something serious had happened. It was obvious that an accident, or maybe even something worse, had taken place. So the police taped off the area and began their investigation. While all this was happening, Mew casually made his way back to the place where Lee Ho had fallen, but it wasn't because he was worried about the police or their investigation. That didn't matter to him at all. The real reason he returned was simple. Right next to that crash site was a 3-story building, and it just so happened to be Lee Ho's school. Since Mew had decided to live Lee Ho's life for now, he figured the next thing to do was to go to school, just like Lee Ho usually did. He walked into the school building, looking around as he tried to figure out where to go. Eventually, he found the right classroom, the one that belonged to Lee Ho. As he reached for the door, he felt a wave of excitement. He was ready to make his entrance, but when he slid the door open, he used way too much force. The door bounced back and hit him square in the face. The once powerful god was now left standing there, totally stunned with a red mark on his face. His big, cool entrance, completely ruined. Still rubbing his face, Mew mumbled something under his breath and stepped into the room. As soon as he did, a student nearby looked up, clearly annoyed by all the noise. The boy glared at him and said with an annoyed tone, "Idiot Lee Ho, be quiet." That one rude comment made Mew forget all about the pain from the door. Without saying a word, he walked straight over to the boy. He stopped just a few inches away, staring at him. The other kid froze in place. It wasn't just because Lee Ho looked different. It was the strange smile on his face. It was a creepy, unsettling grin that clearly didn't belong to the quiet, weak Lee Ho everyone was used to. At that moment, Mew immediately realized who the boy in front of him was. From Lee Ho's memories, he recognized this guy as the bully, the one who had made Lee Ho's life miserable for so long. But the bully had no idea that things had changed. He still thought Lee Ho was the same weak, helpless kid he used to push around. With a smug smile, the boy leaned in and teased, "What's your problem? Did you forget your glasses today, or are you just too dumb to act normal?" Before Mew could even respond, the bully suddenly punched him right in the face. The punch was strong. Blood started to drip from Mew's nose and mouth, splashing onto the floor. The bully laughed loudly, clearly proud of himself, and kept mocking him. "What happened?" he said. "Did you sell your glasses to buy lunch? Or maybe you just lost them, you idiot." Even with blood running down his face, Mew didn't move. He stood perfectly still, calm. In his mind, a real fight didn't begin until both people were fully ready. That was the rule he followed. And right now, he was just waiting for the right moment. Because once the fight truly began, he didn't care if his opponent was human, a monster, or even another god. He was always ready to face them head-on. Mew's main goal in this situation was to figure out if the bully was truly ready for a real fight. He decided on a simple way to find out. He would stay still and let the bully take the first swing. That's exactly what happened. After the bully's punch landed, Mew felt that familiar excitement building inside him and a satisfied smile appear on his face. He wasn't bothered by the punch at all. Without wasting any more time, Mew decided to act. As the bully was still talking, Mu quickly cut him off by throwing a punch right back at the bully's face. The bully, totally unprepared for Mu to fight back, took the hit just like Mu had taken the punch earlier. But as Mu pulled his hand back, a sharp, intense pain shot through his arm. It felt like his muscles were tearing apart. This was a painful reminder that Mu wasn't in his usual godly, powerful body anymore. He was stuck in Lee Ho's weak, human body. The noise from the punch quickly got the attention of the teacher, who rushed over to them, shouting for them to stop fighting. By now, the entire class had turned to watch, their interest growing as the fight continued. The bully, now feeling humiliated and angry, couldn't believe what had just happened. He had punched someone he thought was an easy target, only to end up being the one who got hit back. The bully couldn't hold back his anger any longer. Ignoring the teacher's shouting and the eyes of the entire class watching him, he charged at Mu with fury in his eyes, ready to take out all his frustration. Mu quickly tried to defend himself, managing to block most of the attacks, well, sort of. As the fight went on, he struggled to keep up with the bully's speed and strength. Mu couldn't help but think that if he still had his old, powerful godly body, he would have ended this fight already. For a split second, he even thought about using his god powers to finish the fight, but to his surprise, they didn't work. This shock distracted him, and before he knew it, the bully landed another punch on his face. Luckily, this one wasn't as hard as the first, but it still hurt. The bully, still determined, wasn't going to back down. He was bent on making Lee Ho regret throwing that first punch. On the other hand, Hu found himself in a difficult situation. His new, weak body couldn't keep up. He couldn't throw any strong punches or kicks, and since his god powers weren't working, he had no choice but to think quickly. In one fast move, he lowered his head and let the punch land directly on his skull, knowing that the bones in his head were the only part of his body he could count on to handle the hit. As Mu had expected, the bully's punch landed hard on his skull. The force of the hit was so strong that the bully's fingers snapped, breaking with a loud crack. The pain was so intense that the bully screamed like a child. In that moment, Mu couldn't help but feel like he'd outsmarted him. To finish the fight quickly, Mu decided to use the bully's pain to his advantage. Before the bully could recover, Mu rushed forward and grabbed his hand, using the distraction to strike. Without wasting any time, Mu lowered his head and aimed for the bully's stomach, or maybe even lower, knowing that area was extra sensitive for most guys. The bully, caught off guard, couldn't handle the sudden pain. But Mu wasn't done yet. He wanted to make sure the bully would never forget this moment. With a swift motion, Mu lifted his head and slammed it into the bully's jaw. The blow was too much for the bully to handle. His eyes rolled back and he fell to his knees before collapsing to the ground, unconscious. Meanwhile, the rest of the class stood frozen in shock, recording the entire fight. Watching the weakest kid in school take down one of the biggest bullies was something they could hardly believe. For Mu, everything felt different. He had just been in a real fight for the first time in thousands of years, pushing his body to its limits. The rush of adrenaline felt amazing, but there was no time to celebrate. As the excitement wore off, the pain from all the hits he'd taken hit him all at once. He could taste the blood in his mouth, the sharp metallic flavor, and for a moment, it seemed like too much, even for someone like God Mu. But then something strange happened. He realized he was okay with it. After so long, the pain from the fight actually felt good. It was satisfying, even. A few moments later, as the excitement faded, Mu looked down at the unconscious boy's body. He wasn't done with him yet. Mu sat next to the boy and, to his surprise, thanked him. Then, in a completely unexpected move, Mu leaned in and bit the boy's ear, blood splattering everywhere. But he didn't stop there. He actually tore off a piece of the ear and spat it on the ground in front of his classmates. Horror filled the room. The students couldn't believe their eyes, shocked by what Mu had just done. It was like watching someone completely out of control. Mu, however, couldn't care less about what others thought. Calmly wiping the blood off his face, he continued to glare at the bully's body, which lay completely still, even after losing part of his ear. Biting off the bully's ear had been a brutal act, but it wasn't just about causing pain. It was Mu's twisted way of leaving his mark. It wasn't just about hurting the guy, it was his way of showing appreciation to someone who had given him a fight he truly enjoyed. To Mu, it was a form of respect, marking the bully as someone worth his attention. These kinds of opponents would later be called Mu's playthings, but it was clear that only the strongest fighters, the ones who made him feel excited, could earn this title. Being called one of Mu's playthings was a strange kind of honor, almost like a symbol of strength. Ironically, it was somewhat similar to how humans would sometimes mark animals, but Mu's mark wasn't about humiliation, it was about recognition. Word of this second-year bully getting beaten by the weakest guy in school spread quickly. What shocked everyone wasn't just that the bully lost, it was that he had been completely humiliated, to the point where he had to be rushed to the hospital for emergency care. Like the rest of the students who were curious about what had just happened, Mu stood by and watched as they quickly rushed Liho's bully to the hospital. But Mu wasn't at all concerned about the bully's condition. What really caught his attention was how fast the students had managed to get help by calling an ambulance with just a mobile phone. As the ambulance drove away, Mu casually waved goodbye to his first opponent. He silently hoped that their paths would cross again sometime in the future, looking forward to another chance for a fight. But just as Mu was thinking this, one of the teachers appeared behind him. The teacher was obviously furious and told Mu to follow him to the teacher's office. Once inside, the teacher completely exploded with anger. He wanted to know why Mu had done something so reckless and insane to one of his classmates. The teacher's anger grew so strong that at one point he raised a binder in his hand as though he was going to hit Mu. But Mu didn't even flinch. He stood there completely calm, almost as if he was enjoying the situation. His face even showed a hint of excitement, like he was already looking forward to the next fight. Seeing how strange and almost thrilled Mu seemed, the teacher hesitated. He realized that hitting Mu might just end badly for him, just like the bully who had ended up in the hospital. The teacher ended up skipping any real punishment and instead told Mu, still thinking he was just Liho, to bring his parents to school the next day. Mu had been ready, almost hoping to be struck by the teacher, since that would confirm a fight. But when nothing happened, he dropped the idea of fighting back. The teacher then told him he could go home earlier than the rest of the class. Without arguing, Mu nodded and left the school building. As he walked back to Liho's house, Mu's thoughts drifted. Unlike other gods who fully understood the worlds they ruled, Mu was still unfamiliar with human systems. He wasn't even sure what leaving early meant. Was it just a polite way of telling him to go back to his base? He had no clue, so he assumed that was the case. Mu decided to make the most of the unexpected time off. With all the injuries from earlier, it was the perfect chance to rest and begin training his new, fragile body. If he wanted to keep fighting strong opponents, he'd need to get a lot tougher. His hand was still trembling from the damage it had taken, and the pain reminded him how weak this human form really was. In that moment, he found himself wishing he could still use some of his godlike powers, especially mana, a mystical energy far beyond the reach of ordinary humans that could have healed him in seconds. In some worlds, people called it Chai or Chakra, but most gods simply knew it as mana. Mana was a special kind of energy that flowed through everything in nature. It was like a powerful life force, and those who could use it gained incredible abilities. In certain realms, mana allowed people to become hunters, spellcasters, or powerful fighters. But in the world Mu had come to, that energy didn't exist, or at least he couldn't connect to it. No matter how badly he wanted to tap into mana again, it just wasn't working here. For now, all he could do was deal with the pain and try to get used to being human. Still, he tried one more time to feel mana's energy, hoping something had changed. But just like before, the feeling disappeared almost immediately. That reminded him of his earlier fight, when he tried to use his powers and nothing happened. It was frustrating, but Mu finally accepted the truth. If he wanted to survive here, he'd have to depend on his physical body alone. No more godlike abilities, just strength, instincts, and pain. Eventually, Mu made it back to Liho's house. His body felt completely worn out, and he collapsed onto the bed without even thinking. He knew healing wouldn't be quick. Since there wasn't anything he could do to speed it up, he made the choice to return to the god realm and check in on things there. Just like before, the moment he focused his mind, his soul snapped back into his real body. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he was hit with a shocking sight. Liho was right in front of him, gripping a dragonling by the throat and trying to strangle it, refusing to let the little creature go. The same boy who used to be weak and constantly bullied on Earth now stood with a completely different energy. Liho was no longer the scared, quiet kid. He carried himself with confidence, maybe even a bit too much. As soon as he saw God Mu appear before him, he released his grip on the little dragon and walked straight over, his eyes filled with determination. He didn't know who Mu really was. To him, Mu just looked like some traveler or temporary visitor in this strange realm. Someone who wouldn't be staying long. Thinking he had found a way to gain power, Liho boldly demanded that Mu hand over the dragonling. He believed that if he could take control of the creature, it might help him rise in strength and influence wherever he ended up next. But God Mu wasn't impressed, not even a little. He saw right through Liho's arrogant behavior. Instead of arguing, Mu calmly raised one hand and summoned a divine force. A glowing, supernatural hand appeared out of thin air and wrapped itself around Liho, grabbing him tightly. That single move made it crystal clear just how far above him Mu truly was. Liho froze, shocked and confused, completely unprepared for something like this. He didn't even have time to react properly. But Mu didn't care about his confusion or what he had to say. Without saying much, he began dragging Liho away, his mind already made up. Mu was going to give him a second chance at life, this time in a totally different world. But from the intense look on Mu's face, it was obvious this decision wasn't just about helping Li Ho. There was something deeper going on, something Mu hadn't revealed yet. A few minutes later, Mu and Li Ho arrived in a powerful and mysterious realm ruled by none other than Lucifer, second only to the supreme god in terms of strength and authority in the divine realm. As they entered, Mu carried himself with complete confidence. Just the sound of his footsteps was enough to tell anyone watching that he wasn't here for small talk or polite visits. The realm was silent and still, with only Lucifer present, calmly watching over his planet Elmer from his grand castle. Unlike Mu, who brought a kind of stormy energy with him, Lucifer was focused and serious, his attention fixed on the world he ruled. But Mu didn't hesitate. He marched straight into the castle without asking for permission or even knocking on the giant doors. To him, it didn't matter that Lucifer was one of the highest-ranking gods. He acted like he was walking into the house of a friend, not a divine ruler. Unsurprisingly, Lucifer was not happy. Before Mu could even explain what he was doing there, Lucifer interrupted him, clearly annoyed, and refused to hear anything he had to say. Still, Mu wasn't fazed. With a calm, firm tone, he told Lucifer to open a portal. He planned to send Li Ho to Elmer. Lucifer quickly reminded him that Elmer was his domain, not Mu's, and that Mu had no right to interfere with it. But Mu didn't budge. He stepped forward, looked Lucifer directly in the eyes, and made one thing clear. If Lucifer had forgotten who was stronger between them, Mu was more than ready to remind him, right then and there. Lucifer, realizing that he was completely outmatched by Mu, couldn't hide the mix of frustration and fear on his face. The hesitation in Lucifer's movements only made Mu grow more impatient. Without waiting any longer, Mu decided to take control of the situation. He stepped forward, placing his hand on the surface of Elmer, prepared to act on his own terms. Lucifer, now fully aware of what Mu was about to do, quickly tried to stop him. He warned that it was strictly forbidden for any god to interfere with another god's domain. If a god who didn't control a realm tried to touch it, a powerful, unbreakable barrier would appear to block them completely. Just as Lucifer predicted, the barrier materialized in front of Mu, but to his absolute shock, Mu simply shattered it as if it were nothing more than glass. This left Lucifer in complete disbelief. Unfazed, Mu calmly explained that the rules of the universe weren't set in stone. If someone had enough willpower, they could change them. Then Mu opened his divine hand and released Li Ho from his grasp, gesturing to the portal he had created. He encouraged Li Ho to step forward and take the leap into Elmer. Li Ho stood still for a moment, clearly nervous and uncertain. But Mu reminded him that this was what he had always wanted, and now the opportunity was right in front of him. It was his time to make a choice. Li Ho, still fixated on the idea of gaining power, demanded that Mu hand over the Dragonling once more, hoping to use it as a tool to shape his new life. However, Mu had no intention of parting with his assistant. Without hesitation, he forcefully sent Li Ho directly to Elmer's planet, almost as if throwing him into another world entirely. After the act, Mu couldn't help but reflect on how the younger generation often seem entitled, expecting everything to be handed to them without ever having to work for it. With the situation resolved and no further actions required on his part, Mu turned to Lucifer. He casually told him to take care of the boy before walking away, leaving Lucifer to deal with the consequences. Lucifer, humiliated and seething with rage, could only fantasize about having the power to tear Mu apart. He knew that Mu's arrogance had overshadowed him completely, but Lucifer's own past wasn't so different from Mu's in some ways. He had once been the first demon lord, the ruler of all life on Elmer's planet. In his pride, he had dared to challenge the god who ruled over the world. During their first battle, Lucifer summoned a blinding light that formed into a massive sword, far larger than the god himself. With all his might, he hurled the sword toward the god. The power of the attack was so immense that even the divine being couldn't evade it or defend against it. The sword struck, and the god was split in two, falling before Lucifer's overwhelming strength. After defeating the god who ruled over his world, Lucifer took his place, but that wasn't enough to satisfy his hunger for power. He set his sights on every other god in the divine realm, challenging and defeating them one by one until he stood at the top, claiming the throne as the ultimate ruler. As a demon, he became the god of gods, invincible, unmatched, and unique. Over time, he earned the respect of everyone, something he believed he had rightfully earned. But his reign of glory was short-lived. One day, Mu appeared and crushed him, just as he had done to every god before Lucifer. This shattered the powerful image Lucifer had worked so hard to build. Consumed by rage and humiliation, Lucifer swore revenge. In his fury, he cursed Mu, calling him a human-born bastard, vowing that one day he would have his revenge. Meanwhile, Mu rode calmly atop his Dragonling, heading toward his domain, completely unaware that something in the sky was silently watching him. A demon likely sent by Lucifer was spying on him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. At the same time, the bully from Lee Ho's school had just regained consciousness. Lying in his hospital bed, still seething with anger and pain, the boy couldn't wait to see Lee Ho suffer. Fueled by rage, he grabbed his phone, determined to call someone stronger to teach Lee Ho a lesson. Scrolling through his contacts, he found exactly who he was looking for.